I can't tell you how much we appreciate you joining this podcast. Um, what an impressive background. So, my first question is, you've come from a grassroots activism, even as a young man doing a radio show in Zambia, to a global systems leader. What has stayed the same about your mission and purpose?
And for me, it takes me back to my founding story. I was raised in a small mining town in the copper mining region of Zambia. And as you might know, 60% of Zambia's foreign exports come from copper mining, copper exports specifically. And I was raised in an environment that experienced the negative externalities of mineral exploration. And I was thinking very constantly about how do we create a Venn diagram of economy, society, and nature. And that Venn diagram is, to me, the epitome and credo of human existence, which is circularity, where everything begins to coexist in unison. So the mission of my founding, background and story came from this realization that all of us have got a key role to play in creating a society that not only meets the needs of current generations, but also prepares a strong foundation for future generations to meet their own needs of survival. And with that being said, I've constantly been gravitating towards this shared value of, creating, systems that protect planetary boundaries, but also living within the contours of harmony between myself as a person and nature, but also living within the harmony of myself and other people around me, but also living within the harmony of myself and future generations. So I would say in summary that my foundation of working with communities gave me access to what it means to live through challenges, and moving from there and having a chance to work in the United Nations, in international development and beyond, just gave me a perspective of how there should be harmony between local and global, and that nothing exists independently because we live in a very interconnected society, and we should be able to create a world that sustains all these different independent elements of what makes us as humans.
Well, it's pretty impressive. And I wonder, did that integration of local and global influence you starting Amano SO? Or
Yeah.
and what problem did you intend to solve with Amano SO?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bob. Fundamentally, one of the key things, and I believe we discussed a little bit about this when we were in Denver, Colorado, about
Yes.
the fundamental aspect of what it takes for us to collaborate across generations, both intergenerationally, but also what it means to work together across industries and verticals. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
of the view that all the work that we are doing in circularity, in sustainability, in business, in civil society, takes us back to this very foundation of collaboration over competition, co-creation over individual wisdom, but also the transition from ego systems of awareness to ecosystem-based awareness, which means how do we begin to think about letting go of those artificial separations that divide us, both from a business sense, but also between us as humans, and transition to a more ecosystem awareness. And in this form of ecosystem, I mean the level of awareness that allows us to work together, but the level of awareness that also helps us take a leaf from nature, because nature is harmony. Sustainability is harmony. If things don't work in harmony, they typically tend to denigrate or degrade in ways that might not support our very existence. So Amano So was born out of two key inflection points. The first inflection point, Bob, was I come from Zambia. I packed my bags. I was about to fly for 24 hours across the ocean to come and start grad school at Columbia in New York. It was the very first time that I was going to be away from home for the longest time. I had the opportunities of working in Europe and being in different spaces, but I'd never been away from home for more than a year or 6 months. This was the very first time as a first gen college graduate to be able to, leave my family, leave my friends, leave things that I've been accustomed to on a daily basis and experience something new. So I arrived at JFK very excited, filled with hope and determination because I was coming to this beautiful country that opens and creates a launchpad to a world of broader opportunities for anybody. And landing, going through the train system from JFK all the way into Manhattan, starting school on day one and meeting new friends and building new relationships. Then the time to graduate came, and I realized that a lot of what I had done through my time in graduate school, but also prior, when I was working for organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, was an outcome of relationships and friendships that I had built. But at the same time, those relationships and friendships were built with people that were way older than myself. Others had more experience than I did. And it's an understatement, Bob, for me to say these people didn't contribute extensively to helping me sustain my career, because they did. They were the counselors and the guide rails, and in a proverbial way, I would say they were my guardian angels. So moving from Columbia University, I went to work in the United Nations system. It was the first time I was being a global program director. I'd never known what that meant because I never had anybody in my immediate circles that was holding such type of positions, especially within like a nuclear family. So it meant learning and relearning so many things. And it was all these leaders that were coming, in my path to support me and show me the way and guide me. For example, if I felt a certain level of imposter syndrome, I would call up one of my senior counselors and would have a conversation. They would support me and guide me and give me insights and tools and ways to navigate. I would be thinking about how do I make a particular strategic decision that supports my career and growth. I would bounce off ideas. They essentially became my personal advisory board or my guardian angels, so to say. So Amano was built after I had completed my mandate at the United Nations. I'd spent some time in larger media institutions like Forbes. I was at Schmidt Futures and other global institutions. But at the same time, I felt there was a vacuum in the markets that needed to be filled with a social innovation strategy. And Amano was born as an outcome of distributing wisdom, because the word Amano itself in my native Zambian language means wisdom only. So we built a platform that democratizes access to this type of support that I've described. Personal support, professional leadership support, and identifying high potential, mid-career, early career talent and connecting them to senior leaders in a way that fosters bi-directional learning, because we believe that learning is not single directional. Even the senior leaders that I went to seek wisdom from were also, in my most humble way, learning a few things from me.
No doubt.
So Amano is a constellation of all these experiences. And what we do is done through a three-pronged approach. We have what we call mentor huts, which are groups of 8 to 10 senior leaders and emerging leaders. It's highly curated based on industry, expertise, interests. It's personal and professional. And in that small mentor hut, we have a professional coach or mentor who guides the monthly conversations. The team meets every month. Somebody would volunteer to teach something. The other person would also volunteer to bring up a challenge or barrier or, acupuncture, which they're experiencing in their work or life. And the team would weigh in and provide experiences and wisdom. This, Bob, is very confidential. Everybody in this small group shares their vulnerability in a way that builds trust, in a way that promotes collaboration. And then outside this small group, we have what we call the Amano Speaker Series, where we bring expertise from business schools, from policy think tanks that come and deliver expert-based tools, skills, strategies, and experiences. Then we have a digital platform, which is now the infrastructure that unites all the members of Amano from 10 countries where we currently have presence.
Wow.
And we work with partners like the World Wildlife Fund. And the experience with the World Wildlife Fund came because the senior leadership comprises of individuals that have been my mentors for a very long time. And they felt that the Amano model would provide exponential opportunities to emerging talent around the world. So they are our key partners, and we are now piloting a program which is ending in September, and we're hoping that we can continue to grow.
Wow. So Amano means wisdom in your native language. What does so mean? What does that mean together?
Absolutely. Actually, it's supposed to mean Amano so chabe. So it's a combination of two different languages. So Zambia has about 73 languages and dialects. So the two major spoken languages are Bemba, Nyanja, and others. So these are very Bantu languages. So Amano is a Bemba, adjective for wisdom. And Sochabe is a Nyanja word for only. So we took away CHE and only left SO to make it Amano So, because we felt it was rolling better on the tongue, and we just called it Amano So.
Wow. But one of the things we've talked about several times is how you've worked across public policy, academia, and in the private sector. Where do these worlds most often get misunderstood in each other's?
I think for me, Bob, it's going back to the foundation of how, the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofit sector emerged. And what problem were they all trying to solve? Because like you described, over time, we've seen that instead of creating congruency across all these different sectors, there seems to be like a sort of division, which I think has been artificially created. Because in the essence of business, in addition to creating shareholder value, businesses also solve economic problems. They create opportunities that enable humanity to grow, develop, provide, and innovate. And in the same vein, organizations in the nonprofit space or public institutions are equally trying to solve similar problems that businesses intend to solve, including how do we create shared prosperity for society? How do we ensure that we create systems that enable that nobody's left behind? And I think the misalignment comes in when we see that these institutions are trying to solve different problems, because in essence, they're all working towards creating one common solution of uplifting the living standards of people, ensuring that innovation continues to grow, and ensuring that there's also opportunities for scaling best practices that we are observing across the different industries. And I feel that from an expertise perspective, the skills and experiences are very transferable. What I've used in the public space or in the nonprofit space are skills that I've used in Amano, which is a social enterprise. And I've seen even other leaders across different institutions pointing to the fact that these skills are very, transboundary, and they can also be, can be, transferred across systems.
Is it possible that what you're describing, if I've understood it correctly, is something more like we focus on what's different instead of what's the same, or what what we're trying to do in one part of that Venn diagram versus the fact that there's a lot of similarities in the other Venn diagram, and we're really not focused on that. We're more focused on the differences. Do you think
Yes,
some of that contributes?
I think it does, and you're very correct, because I think when I look at even like the issue of creating what we described as ecosystems, we're tending not to focus on all the different, pieces of the whole system. I believe that even business, social impact, sustainability, public policy are all just pieces of one puzzle. And
No doubt.
if we have to create a system that complements each other, then we have to piece together all these different systems. But then it gets back to like, how do we become aware and understand that all these elements are very interrelated? And how do we use a systems-based approach to design solutions
Yeah.
that speak to the different elements? And I think the strength of a whole complete system lies in the ability to strengthen all the independent pieces. And if we can be able to reach a stage, both as a collective and as a society, where we draw the lines across how the links work together, we can be able to explain in a way that justifies that, cooperation, co-creation, and collaboration can help us enhance and grow, as opposed to, a competition that prevents, the cross-pollination and scaling of solutions which are working.
It seems to me that there's a lot of synergy that's possible. And like you talked about earlier, humility, um, letting go of ego, being vulnerable, and realistic about what you can achieve. In my experience, a lot of nonprofits and other groups want to be everything to everybody instead of being part of something that serves everybody. Which leads me to my next question. When you talk about partnerships and collaborations, what surprised you most in terms of impact? What's kind of been a real success in that space? We can beat the problems to death, but there's successes everywhere, and I'm sure you've been exposed to some. What comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your initial question, I think that it's quite critical to think about how can we not be everything and be the best at whatever we're trying to do. I think it's where excellence comes in. Across the different sectors that we are working, how do we endeavor to be the best and have a unique value proposition that makes us, extremely, extremely competitive, but also a source of innovation that can be cross-pollinated and scaled elsewhere.
It really
In
takes
the
the abundance mentality, doesn't it? You know,
Absolutely, you have to think differently.
yes, you do. Yeah, yeah.
And I think it also brings me to the understanding that you never understand a person until you consider things from their point of view. And I think it's that level of understanding that begins to enable us to even collaborate and care more about the questions than necessarily the answers that we are seeking. When I think about some of the successes and outcomes that I've seen, especially in solutions that are trying to create shared value for, say, shareholders, stakeholders, but also impacting communities, there are different models that I've come across, that I've read about, that I've interacted with, one of which being the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which was established by Professor Muhammad Yunus. It redefined what microfinancing has ended up becoming. They were lending money to individuals in society that were considered to be at the bottom of the pyramid, those that wouldn't even be lent any money if they went to a traditional bank because they had high credit risk. But the Grameen Bank decided to change that approach and gave money to people in communities that were poor. But to their surprise, the default rate was almost zero. Everybody was paying back whatever loans they were getting. And it's that model that we've also seen uplift millions and millions of people out of poverty because it's women, smallholder farmers, small and medium enterprise owners, the individuals that run economies who are now being powered with an extra amount of capital for them to be able to scale or to be able to sustain their operations. And they were learning how to, manage books. These are people that never went to business schools or went to fancy institutions, but they were understanding how profit and loss works in a very simplified way and enabling their children and, family to access a dignified life. And it's that model that we've seen scale to different parts of the world. We've also seen other institutions that are focusing on how do we add value to our products without, degrading our planet. And we are seeing that doesn't compromise on profits in most cases. And I think it's these examples or experiences that also give me a strong conviction that if we begin to understand why, the fundamental why behind the work that we're doing across the different sectors, we begin to find solutions that are scalable, solutions that address the core problem that we intend to solve.
Brighton, I'd kind of like to move over to how Amano interacts with the circular economy and sustainability a little bit, and wonder if there's an example of how Amano So help broker trust across the different sectors, and perhaps that applied to some of the work you're doing in sustainability and the circular economy.
Absolutely. That sounds exciting.
So, where do you think the power resides in the sustainability work being done today? And how do we shift it where it could do the most good?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking very constantly, Bob, especially now when we are seeing an evolution in the way that sustainability is communicated. We're seeing that there are particular expressions that are not, being considered the way they were considered way back. There's a lot of censoring and filtering of particular words. And we're seeing that evolution. I think when we look back in the climate space, there was a moment when we would discuss and talk a lot about the ozone layer. And then we transitioned out of that to now nature-based solutions to climate, decarbonization, industry-based innovations. And the language evolved based on the ever-evolving data. And I think right now we're at a very inflection point where data-driven decisions will determine what sort of direction a company or an organization takes. It will also determine what type of engagements, either internally or externally, an organization or a company ends up taking. But I think it's the constellation of public policies. We're seeing changes in compliance when we look at the policies in Europe, also in the United States, Africa, and around the world. I think the ever-evolving landscape is now pushing business, society, and individuals to start rethinking unique ways of addressing the same problem of reducing emissions, ensuring that the lifetime of products is secular and it's sustainable and it doesn't create negative externalities, or it minimizes those externalities on people and nature. I think the most success will come from understanding what sort of data and measurements that institutions are prioritizing, and how is that creating the type of outcomes they're looking for. I think inputs is one thing,
Wow.
outputs becomes yet another. And I think it's thinking about the type of outcome indicators and metrics that an institution wants to prioritize, and the type of success outcomes they want to see within the contours of sustainability and circularity.
So if you were to redesign one thing to accelerate that in public, private, academic institutions and their interactions, what would it be?
I think the fundamental thing that I would do, Bob, given a chance, of course, fully respecting and humbly acknowledging that there won't be any one size fits all. I think it's bringing together diverse expertise, the brain trust from across, technical, policy, humanities. Because when you bring unique people together towards a particular problem that are coming from different schools of thought, the type of contributions, which are the inputs, are quite unique. It's a diversity of input that will create the type of outputs or outcomes that an institution would be seeking. I think a one directional sort of input creates one directional outputs. If we want the type of outputs or outcomes that represent the entire spectrum of expertise, from policy to legal, compliance, engineering, science, communication and art, we have to put all these different skills together. And I think we might have a better chance of having the outputs that speak to all these different elements.
Have you seen a small scale solution like that deserves to be scaled globally?
Wow, that's quite a $1 million question, Bob, because I have actually come across quite a number of
Sure.
best practice, tested examples, initiatives, project solutions. Some might be in different industries. And I think I'm being driven to think a lot more about, artificial intelligence, for example, and how we're seeing that AI itself as a tool is so replicable across industries, be it from the perspective of data collection and analysis, eliminating the amount of time it takes to be able to look at different large data sets, to the sort of accelerated, inputs and outputs. So, like, that's one case. One of the companies that I was looking at, though it's not in Circularity, has been streamlining what it means to understand legal analysis, be it understanding climate policies. And they've designed a tool specifically to help anybody at any level of career stage to easily understand climate science. They're called Climate Mind. And one of the founders is one of the UN global champions. The other one is called Harvey, which is just redefining what it means to understand complex, policy and legal underpinnings of any industries, including climate. But one thing that they acknowledge is that while these tools and resources can help us with the inputs, I doubt there's going to be a time anytime soon where an AI humanoid is going to stand in front of a judge and be able to argue a case. Maybe that might happen at some point, but we don't know.
So, very good. So, what's one uncomfortable truth about circularity or sustainability work that more leaders need to say out loud?
I think it's just like, to me, I've seen the sensitivity that has come with, you know, be it shifts in global policy, shifts in legislation, shift in leadership around the world, where this sensitivity to what should be said and what should not be said. Of course, risk mitigation is quite critical, but I think we have to face the fundamental truth that the planet is warming. That's the reason why we're doing the work that we're doing. You know, average temperatures are increasing on a constant basis. If we don't accelerate the pace at which we implement circularity innovations and strategies, then we'll continue to discuss the same things. When we look at the UNFCCC, we have COP30 coming up. We'll continue having all these convenings happening if we don't take those radical measures of folding our sleeves, getting work done, because that's where the true sort of solutions come. It's individuals with the resolution and the determination to say enough is enough. We have to fold our sleeves and get work done. I think it's the work done and, you know, talk divide that needs to be bridged. If we can really bridge that intentionally, I think we can see quite a lot of replicable solutions and actionable insights coming out of, you know, different leaders across different industries.
Very good. If this podcast inspired just one decision maker to act differently, what would you hope they would do next?
I think the most important thing, Bob, I would aspire for any leader listening or watching to do is, I think, to rethink why are they doing what they're doing in circularity? What is that one major thing they want to be known for? Because you can't be everything, like you said initially. You can't attempt to solve every particular problem, because then you end up being everywhere. In the African language, the Zambian language, there's a proverb which says, Chimbui afuile ntangalala. So the loose translation of that native expression is that an animal, in this case, a wild dog in the wild, died with all the four legs spread out because they wanted to be all over. And it's an expression that reminds us that you have to pretty much decide what's the one thing you want to be known for. When we look at the private sector, I remember I read one of the books by one of the McKinsey partners that was looking at, modeling the practice of your to-be list. So instead of creating your to-do list, create a to-be list. Be it as an individual, as a company, as an institution, what's that to-be list? Because then it inspires you to work towards that to-be list. Do you want to, redefine what it means to recycle paper or to recycle particular materials or repurpose? If you understand your to-do list, then you can aspire towards working towards that. But it's identifying your why, the fundamental reason that wakes you up at night, knowing what can be done practically and incrementally, and maybe identifying one single thing and adding that one single thing to your to-be list and working towards that very ferociously, very intentionally. And if the evidence and the data changes, go back to your to-be list and iterate. And I think it's that entrepreneurial fashion and, agile fashion that can create transformation.
Wow, that's a great answer to that question. Last question. Looking into your crystal ball for circular and Amano, tell us what you see coming, what it means, and what you use a magic wand to get done first.
Absolutely. Well, that's an interesting question, first of all, because if I ever had a magic wand, I would inspire leaders in organizations, for-profit, non-profit, public institutions, to care for everybody that adds value to the outcomes and the impact of the institution. I think very often there's a primary focus on top leaders. Of course, they're busy, they're driving strategy, organizational agility. But I think everybody that's contributing to an institution should be supported in a way that enables them to reach their highest potential. And I think it also makes business sense. It makes business sense whether it's in non-profit and for-profit. And it's because of this school of thought that within Amano, we work very constantly with learning and development teams, different leaders, to think about how do you create pathways for leadership development and mentorship and coaching for everybody in the organization. And how do we do that at scale using technology and AI? And we've built a platform that helps us deliver on that. We've also been working a lot in sustainability, conservation, and circularity. We are working in about more than 6 countries now, and the model focuses primarily on how do we maximize the productivity and efficiency of everybody, not as a one-off thing, but as a continuous, structured program, unlocking skills development, helping people understand where they're lacking, where they can grow, and giving them a safe space where they can express themselves without a sense of shame. And it's been quite exciting. We are running a program now focusing on renewable energy. So we have young professionals who are in renewable energy, some that are working on nature-based solutions, others are working on human-wildlife conflict. We have, conservation biologists, we have water engineers, we have civil engineers, and are applying all their skills to sustainability, which also makes me believe that every career is a sustainability career. You can apply your skills to advance circularity, whether you're in finance, accounting, engineering, law, policy, marketing, communication. You can apply your skills and create impact. And I would also say to leaders that it's this mindset within organizations that can help everybody see that larger picture. Whether you're a financial institution or a government department, you don't have to change the entire world. But if you can change the little corner of your world, then you would have accomplished success.
Wow. Well, Brighton, I cannot thank you enough for taking time and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you.
Bob,
thank you very much.
I'm so grateful for giving me this privilege and opportunity to be here. It's leaders like you that are creating the type of world that the next generation will enjoy and be proud of. Thank you.
The work in progress, my friend. The work in progress.